everything school should have taught you in one place. With a property portfolio of over 17 million and an accountancy firm of over 16,000 clients, as well as being an accountant to some of the wealthiest people in Australia, Jeremy Iannuzzelli will be sharing his lessons on everything school should have taught you so you can build the life you want.
Welcome to What School Should Have Taught You. Today we've got Vince Iannuzzelli again, my father. I'm very happy to have him here in the studio. And today we're going to be talking about superannuation. There's a lot of self-managed super funds getting established. Lots of people going into property and shares. Vince is an accountant with over 40 years of experience in all the big firms and running his own firm, and also has done over 1,000 audits of self-managed super funds. So he's got to see a different array of different super funds and how they've invested, and also look at the audit risks that are associated with it. As we all know, when you are running a self-managed super fund, an independent auditor must review it to ensure a lot of things are compliant in accordance with the SIS Act. And Vince has got to see a huge portion of issues, as well as obviously things that have done really well. So Vince, Dad, thank you very much for joining us today again.
Thank you, Jeremy.
Now we're going to talk about a topic where I know you can speak underwater about, but we're going to talk about self-managed super fund and more so your view as an auditor and the things that you've seen. So I really want to kick off with super, and especially looking at accumulation phase. What are some of the things that you've seen as an auditor where people have done quite well or where things have been quite bad?
Well, when you're talking about self-managed super, a lot of the issues are audit issues mainly relate around two things: property and Bitcoin. Let's leave Bitcoin for the moment, please.
We'll touch on Bitcoin though, because it's a very important point.
So property is certainly one of the major auditor issues. And with property, of course, there's these limited recourse borrowing arrangements, which allows, in effect, the super fund to borrow, even though the super fund can't borrow. But let's just keep it simple, the super fund borrowing to buy a property asset. The concern is it's not just for the auditor but for the members and a trustee that when you are buying a property, generally what is happening is you're putting all the eggs in one basket. And not only are you putting all the eggs in one basket, you're putting all the future eggs into the one basket. What I mean by that is this: let's say you have $300,000 in super already, say it's in cash, and you go and borrow $300,000 to go and buy a property. So it's a $600,000 property, $300,000 loan, therefore you got your equity. Well, that's fine. You've put your $300,000 in property, but it also means that all the rents that receive, because you've got to pay the interest, plus probably the contributions for the next 7 or 8 years are going to be totally dedicated to paying off the loan principal and interest. So you're investing your future contributions, not just the past contributions. And the type of issues which I've seen over the last few years is when interest rates go up, and that wasn't so long ago, certain banks have decided not to fund limited recourse borrowing arrangements, and the ones that remain are charging above the market rate of interest. You can get into a quick situation where your negative gearing vastly exceeds the super going in from your current contributions.
So that would be the rental income plus your contributions being on par or potentially less.
Potentially, I've seen it less.
Than the interest that's getting charged.
That's right. So the member has to put in additional contributions, whether it's deductible or non-deductible. Let the member work that one out. So so you're relying on the capital gain, but unfortunately the capital gain can't fund the loan repayments.
Because one of the issues with super, especially under the SIS Act, is that equity can't be extracted from the property.
Correct.
So then that means the way to realise the gain would be to actually physically sell the property, and then you pay the capital gain tax, of course.
And so property, the one-trick pony, that's what it basically is, and it doesn't allow you then to balance out the investment. So there's what I call an investment strategy risk. That's fine if you know it, and that's fine if you can meet it. Sometimes their business starts to go bad, or they lose their job. They don't have contributions coming in, and I've seen that problem occur. So it's a forced sale of the property inside the superannuation
And is that
fund.
where you as an auditor need to also review the going concern of the superannuation fund as well?
Yeah, absolutely. Raise the issue that, look, the cash is being burned. So because of the loan repayments, you start off with the property negatively geared, $100,000 in cash at the start of the year. It's now 45, and you sort of say, well, there's only 1 more years of cash there. So how are you going to fund it? Will it be extra contributions because the 45 will become zero, and then you've got a problem. So that's where, and I've seen situations where a member will just simply put money in, not calling it a contribution, to fund the loan repayment. Well, that's a no-no. That's an audit issue, and that's a contravention.
So you need to, if you're going to be putting money in your super fund can't borrow money outside limited recourse borrowing arrangements. So it must be receiving those contributions as either concessional or non-concessional, which is an after-tax movement of money.
Property is a great wealth creation asset. Property is a lousy retirement asset. Now, that's whether it's in a self-managed super fund or even in your own personal hands. But let's take self-managed super funds. One of the advantages of a self-managed super fund is you can convert your funds into a pension, an account-based pension. I don't want to get too technical, which allows you to take out a tax-free pension. Very powerful, doesn't even hit your tax return as income. Very, very powerful. And if it was a property, that means the rental income is tax-free. But you got to pay it out in cash. And if most of the assets are in the building, very limited cash on hand, there won't be cash to pay the pension.
So low liquidity.
Low liquidity, which means you've got to sell. I had an instance just the other day. Someone I know, they've rented a property, an industrial property for their business, and they wanted to buy, but they couldn't. So I said, how are you buying? They said, we've got an option. We've got an option to buy. I said, that's fantastic. Yeah, it's 4 years' time. So how they got the option for 4 years' time, the landlord that owned the industrial property is retiring in 4 years' time.
So just for anyone that's listening, an option is that they've kind of secured an agreement which is legally binding in some instance, where within 4 years they can buy the property at this price. Yeah. They may have paid an option fee, and if they don't go through with the option, they may lose their fee. It's all obviously disclosed in the agreement that's been put in place.
So the landlord has allowed the option. I will sell in 4 years because he was retiring. He's got to live off the self-managed super funds, and he needed to cash up the property. So you really can't hold the property in pension phase. Now, everyone's different. You may have a lot of cash. You might have one property and $2 million in shares. You don't know. But if the property is the main asset, converting to a pension makes it impossible, which means you've got to sell.
And is that because often the rental income that the property is generating is just not equivalent to the actual value? Because, again, in account-based pension mode, you are governed by a certain drawdown percentage.
Yeah. If you're over 65 and you convert to a pension phase, you've got to take 5% of the value of the fund.
Which includes the gross value of the property?
Not just the cost, but the market value of the property, which is another audit issue, make sure the market value is the correct value. And most properties will not give a net return of 5%. Certainly residential won't. Once you might have 5% rent, but then when you take off all the council rates and a whole range of things, industrial may get you there depending on what it is, but generally it doesn't. So you're going to deplete the cash pretty quickly. The net income won't, and plus you've got administration costs as well.
Of course.
But the net income won't meet it. So it's a bad retirement asset, but I also, forgetting about super, but also personally, it's a bad retirement asset because if it's your only retirement asset, there won't be enough income. If it's a mixture of property, shares, other super and whatever, absolutely. And that's what the situation
So you're going to cause a stir by saying that, property may not be the best retirement asset and you're using net yield as a base. But is there an example you can give where residential property as a retirement asset has been, this old story, they're asset rich, cash flow poor? Is there an example you can share with us about someone who had a great portfolio but just making no money from it?
Look, I know someone who's got a great portfolio, absolutely. They've just sold a property in the last week to cash up so they can continue their lifestyle. But and if they're very good properties, they've gone up, great areas, gone up in value so much, such that the net return is somewhere between 1 and 1.5%.
So we're talking very blue chip properties, but really good capital growth.
Yep.
Not necessarily, obviously, the right level of net cash flow.
Correct. So 1.5% won't allow them to live the lifestyle they want. And that's fine. They knew that. So they got to sell a property, which they just did, and that'll fund them for the next 4 or 5 years anyway. But we've always talked about doing a business plan for each property. What can we do with that property to increase the rent? Do we do some refurb? Do we do something else to it? And sometimes, no, that is what it is. But in good areas, you're not going to get a high return. In bad areas, you might get your dollar for dollar, but you're not going to get, if you own this is a specific situation, if you own a $15 million property in one of the best suburbs in Sydney, how much rent are you going to get?
$5,000 a week.
And when your land tax bill is 40% of your rent, 40% of you won't get $5,000 a week, but your land tax bill in New South Wales is 40% of your rent, you've got a problem.
Yeah,
that's exactly what's happening.
That means you've got 60% of the rent left over to pay all the other costs and then hopefully a little bit left over for
So that's why I say retirement. But if it's a part of a bigger portfolio, it's wow. So commencing a pension is no good. Look, other problems with property in the super from an auditor point of view, people want to use a property for themselves. It might be a property up the coast, or will Airbnb it, which you're allowed to do, not a problem, but then they can use it themselves, especially over the Christmas period. Well, no, you can't do that. You cannot use an asset. You can't derive a benefit from the superannuation fund.
Can you rent it to your children, though?
Look, you can't. No, not to your children.
Friends?
Look, then you're getting this is causing auditor now you're giving me problems already. I'm starting to shake because I get all of that, right?
Yeah.
So all these deals which are done.
How about renting your property to your business?
Absolutely. That's one of the main advantages of property and self-managed superannuation. A self-managed super fund can buy an industrial property, yes, and rent it to a business associated with a member.
And when you say industrial, you also mean commercial, like offices as
Correct,
well?
yeah. Anything to do with a business. And that's very valuable. There is a downside, which is not an auditor issue, but think of it this way. If your business is going bad, and it happens sometimes, that means your super fund property could be having a bad tenant. So it just doubles up a bit. So you just got to manage that and make sure that you've got enough money to pay the expenses.
I get a question all the time, and I think this is really valid, especially for a lot of people listening. They talk about we want to buy a property that we may want to live in, say, at retirement phase. So husband and wife, they've bought a property up the coast, down the coast, whether it's Queensland or Victoria, New South Wales, anywhere in the state. They're account-based pension. It's all pension phase now. There's no tax if they sell it. Can they live in that property while the super fund owns it?
Again, they're deriving a benefit whilst the property is owned by the super fund. Once they decide to live in it, they've got to transfer the property out of the super fund as a payment. So it could be a lump sum payment, could be a pension payment, depending on how it works inside the fund. But no, that property must be transferred out.
Now, we know there will be no capital gain tax because they're account-based pension, but how about stamp duty? Is there some concession involved for it?
Well, certainly in New South Wales, which I think may be applicable, the answer is yes, as long as members who had the ownership of the property inside the super fund become the owners of the property outside the super fund.
So if you've got the self-managed super fund with the beautiful coastal property and you want to transfer it to me as part of your pension, I've got to pay stamp duty.
Correct, because you're not. It's a change in beneficial ownership. There is a small amount of stamp duty, 500 or 750. So if I owned it, let's say me and mum,
your wife, yep,
right, and we transferred it to our name, me and mum, there's nominal stamp duty.
Bugger all, immaterial.
Yeah.
Immaterial. So that's something then you need to maybe chat with your accountant and then they can run it past the order. Because definitely if you're buying in a super fund and you're wanting to use that property for yourself in the future, you can't do it while the super fund owns it.
And one of the other issues is you may have the major asset being a property and mum and dad 50-50 funds and one passes away, which means that the super fund must pay out the benefits of that member.
Now, I'm going to slow you down here because we've spoken about in past episodes about wills, and this is a very important topic because this catches a lot of people out. If they're, again, as Vince and my father said, husband and wife, one passes away and there's a binding death nomination, which means that needs to be paid out, within a couple of weeks, then all of a sudden you've got issues. You've got liquidity issues. So I'll let you continue on.
The trustee's got to be in a position to pay out the funds, and if the funds are in a property, that property must be sold.
But can't that property just get assumed by the ownership of the super fund and the other member?
In one instance, it can be when it's in pension mode, and if the lawyer's done the right thing called a reversionary pension. And I'm not a lawyer, but yes, it can be. But that's in pension mode. A reversionary pension is when a pension gets transferred. But if you're not in pension, like you're 40 years old, you're not in pension mode. That's not available to you. So
if you're listening to this or your parents are listening to this, reversionary pension is very important to consider if you're in pension phase, because that may stop the property from having to be sold, and therefore the surviving member, I'm assuming, takes the pension thereafter on behalf of the deceased spouse.
That's right. And there's rules around transfer balance accounts and whatever, but that's somebody will handle that. So from an auditor point of view, valuations are very important because under the SIS Act, Superannuation Industry Supervision Act, trustees must value assets at market value. And this may become extra important if and when the Division 296 comes into play. If you're over $3 million, you're taxed on unrealised gains. But even if the fund's in, under $3 million, but in pension mode, pensions are based on the market value of the fund. So valuation becomes a big issue. And it's always an audit problem because the trustees maybe don't do not enough work.
And there's an account-based pension cap of roughly about 1.9, maybe take $2 million.
That's converting to pension, but that becomes important. If you want to convert, yes, correct, market valuation becomes important. I would say a lot of trustees don't understand the limited recourse borrowing arrangement. I see a lot of situations where the loan's been paid out, so in other words, done, loan's finished, and therefore the assets should be fully owned by the super fund, but that transfer never happens. So it's an auditor issue because there's another section in SIS which says all assets must be owned by the fund.
Yep.
And if the loan's been paid out, all assets must be owned by the fund.
So again, for context, the super fund under a limited recourse borrowing arrangement, the property is owned by the custodian company on behalf of the trustee if there's a loan in place. And when that loan is paid out, there's a very special mechanism within inside the SIS Act and the Bear Trust, which stipulates that the custodian entity and Bear Trust will transfer that property to the trustee in the super fund. And there's a small nominal fee, I think, of stamp duty as well.
So they're auditor issues. Let him earn his keep, but there's so many benefits, as you're aware. There's obviously capital gains tax benefits, the ability to buy a property when you don't have to cash yourself, no tax on income in pension phase, and when you convert from accumulation to pension, even though there's this huge unrealised gain, that becomes tax-free. What a winner.
Absolutely.
What a winner. So no, there's a lot of pros, but you've got to cover off all the cons, and a lot of the cons around the auditor, and the auditor has to do the right thing.
So some really good things there, but I just want to touch upon Bitcoin, because Bitcoin's starting to become a lot more prevalent in people's investment strategies in super. I know it's giving me some grief with the auditor that I use, and I can't use my father as an auditor because I need to have a certain level of arm's length distance and no conflict of interest and independence. But what's your gripe? What's all gripe with auditors with the Bitcoin? Can you just explain some fundamental things people need to know if they're buying Bitcoin in their super?
Well, number one, as an auditor, I'm now refusing to audit anything with Bitcoin. So that's number one, because I've been through the wars on it. And the first lot of wars were that, look, remember, all assets must be owned by the fund, and a lot of members would buy Bitcoin, but it was in their own name.
Because the exchanges weren't intuitive enough.
Yeah, why is it in your name? Oh, it was too hard to set up the super fund. And if I did it in my name, I use super fund money, but it's in my name. Well, that's a no-no, right? Absolutely not. So that's ownership is one. Look, existence is another, because auditors have to look at the existence, valuation, ownership and whatever. And did it exist at 30 June? I mean, it's not like a title deed. It's not like a share that you got CompSec or NAP trading. Very difficult. Now, if it's with a custodian, it's a better chance.
So a crypto exchange platform.
Yeah. Otherwise, if they do it themselves, all these people, you hear the stories, they've got it on their little drive.
It's called a hard wallet,
and
or
somehow
cold storage.
Someone stole the computer. I mean, that's how does the auditor know where the Bitcoin is? So that's why I refuse to do Bitcoin audits. To me, Bitcoin has got its major advantages, but not in super. It's not a long-term strategy. I know it's gone up now to 180,000 Aussie dollars or whatever, but that can go up whether it's in your name or not. No, I think super should stick to good strategies.
So a couple of things that you need to know. If you are going to be buying cryptocurrency in super, the cryptocurrency itself must be in the name of the super fund and the trustee. So very important the exchange is done correctly. If you are going to be using cold storage or hard wallets, and apologies for the lingo not being correct, but if you are going to use that, you need to make sure that you can very easily identify that the super fund owns that cryptocurrency, because an auditor may need to physically cite that particular hard or cold storage or hard wallet in order to ensure that all funds are documented and must be under the ownership, or all assets are documented correctly and must be under the ownership of the super fund.
Correct.
Any other things you would like to share of some things that as an auditor you've seen that probably need to be done better or potentially are risks?
Look, the other issues may be mixing up the super fund and their personal affairs. Again, one of the SIS Act conditions or regulations are that they must be separate. Super fund must be held separate, remembering that the super fund must have a trustee, company or individual, which are the members of the fund. And they get it always mixed up all the time. Sometimes they draw, how many times I've seen they've drawn their private expenses out of the super fund, and they say, oh, I made a mistake. It's all on the one screen on their internet banking.
Yep.
And there's money in that account, and it's in, oh yeah, I'm down as a name on it. I'll take it out of there. That's drama. That's a no-no, and that's a contravention. So you have to remedy the situation, and normally with interest. If you don't treat it seriously and you don't think about it, the auditor will have a lot of problems. You'll have a lot of problems. And the tax office is on the warpath of taking money out of super.
Yeah, absolutely. Vince, I'd like to thank you very much for today. It's been a pleasure having you here in the studio again. There's always a world of wisdom and experience that you do share. Guys, if you're really liking this content, don't forget to hit like and subscribe on iTunes and Spotify. Jump over to our YouTube channel, hit like and subscribe. Don't forget to leave any comments in the section. I might be able to get Vince to maybe answer a couple of questions if you are leaving them. I'm Jeremy Iannuzzelli. This is what schools should have taught you. We'll see you next week.